I just want everybody to know, if you are a new employee, I want you to know that you have this option. Krista, I believe Krista or Stacy will put the URL. And Christina, can you mute, please? Thanks. There we go. Krista or Stacy will put this URL in the chat on the meeting so you can access this. It uses the exact same login credentials as your production login. So you would log into it in exactly the same way as you would log into production. Your agency name, your username, and in fact, your production password. If for any reason you do not have access or you can't get logged into staging, please submit a help desk ticket and we will make sure that your user has access. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping right off the top there. All right, so I have logged into the Clatsop County agency in the staging environment. You can see, you know, as it welcomes me and whatnot, it has my logged in user. I do not have pages set up yet I do not have a home page, a custom home page set up here. So I'm just going to show you how to do that in case any of you haven't attended yet the Acela 101, or you've been on the system for a long time and you just simply didn't know. But of your favorited pages on the Your Pages tab from the Launchpad, there's a little house icon. You can set a custom home page now since our update this past June. So you can set the record list to be your default home page or the task list. These are the two pages I would recommend, one or the other. In fact, my recommendation, frankly, would be the My Tasks page, that you would set that as your custom home page. As soon as you set that as your custom home page, I'm going to log right back in here. As soon as I bubble in that house, set my custom home page, notice that it is going to automatically, as a default, land me on my task list. So this can be very helpful to just setting up your general, your general work environment to a way that's just most usable for you. Again, I do most highly recommend that the task list often is your home page or the record list. The task list is going to essentially drive your workday and let you know what's available or what's been assigned to you, either workflow tasks in the form of things like staff review, report and decision, hearings, whatnot. Inspections, if your agency actually does field inspections. Electronic documents that have been uploaded can be actively assigned to any specific user. So if you're the case planner or the planner of record, on a given application, you might have requested some documents or documentation or what have you, and the customer's uploaded something. Ultimately, a tech or a front office person managing online uploads can ultimately assign that to you as the assigned case planner. And then activities. Activities is something we're going to be training on pretty heavily for a small part of today, because activities are the administrative tasks that you do in between some of the high level required tasks that are built out in what we call the workflow. Workflow is the life cycle of the record from beginning to end. And in the planning world, the beginning is deeming something complete. And then somebody doesn't have us muted. Deeming something complete kind of kicks off the process in planning, and then ultimately completing the record in one way or the other. And I say in one way or the other because you have some options about when you want to actively complete a record. You could complete a record at decision and then track the appeal period on a separate line item, so to speak. We'll get to that here when I train. Or you can leave the application open until the appeal period's been exhausted and then complete the application. But workflow is those high level tasks that would be required to kind of move the record, the application through the process. Activities would be all the administrative things that we know are required in between all of that. Sending out notification on planning actions and things like that are often required, tracking hearings and appeals and things like this. All right, so just kind of a little bit of a push. If you are not a person, a user to date that uses the My Tasks page, I would highly recommend that you consider it. Because this is kind of where Acela has designed, where all the action happens that drives your workday more or less. And then each of these 4 tabs are the corresponding assignment areas that Acela has. There's assignments to be had in workflow, in inspections, in electronic documents, should you choose to use that, and then ultimately in activities. And on each of the 4 separate tabs here, notice that you just toggle through the tabs by clicking the separate tabs. There are filters that you can apply to the data. So if I were in workflow tasks, I can say I want to see all unassigned department tasks. It's going to take a minute probably for it to load. Sometimes that can be a lot of data. But long story short, as this gets loaded here, is that I can decide how I want to pare down the information that is displayed based on the different filters that are offered. So there are 986 tasks. Again, this is a training environment, but there are 986 unassigned workflow tasks on planning records. Notice that for those of you who, I'm maybe getting ahead of myself, for those of you who aren't aware, code enforcement is an enhanced record type that we provide inside the planning module. The record type itself is called the planning investigation record. You might have the planning module at your agency, but your agency might not use the planning investigation code enforcement record. Or it could be just the opposite. Your agency might not use the planning module for planning and zoning purposes, but they might use code enforcement. I do have 2 agencies that are in that bucket, Marion County and City of Kaiser. Well, City of Kaiser now is using the other parts of planning, but they didn't used to. So I just was pointing that out because in the midst, in these various results that I am receiving here, sorry, go back to my list, in the different results that I am receiving here for unassigned department tasks, code enforcement is showing here as well. So the ideal would be for us, which I just am not seeing that for whatever reason, Clatsop County is missing a lot of our filters. Stacy and Krista, we probably want to make note of that. We have filters now, Gail. If you don't have them in production, let's look in production very quickly, just because I did open your agency also in production so that I could bounce back and forth. Just so you do have them in production, they're just not in staging. So, okay. There are filters now that allow an agency to separate. They're just not showing here in the practice environment, but that allow an agency to separate out the code enforcement work from the actual planning zoning work. So that can be very helpful, right? I don't need maybe a good number of these records that are making up this high number here are actually code enforcement tasks that we may or may not need to care about at this time. We can create custom filters for you as well. So if you're an agency that, you know, you've kind of found, well, shoot, you know, I would love to, just as an example, you know, this unassigned department task, when I run this, Kelly, you know, I really don't need to see the code enforcement stuff here. Can you take that out? We can create custom filters for you. And we can create those on any of the tabs indicated here. So noting that production is the environment that would have the full offering of our different filter options. If there is something that is not here that you really need, please reach out to us through a help desk ticket and we can provide a custom filter, assuming that it's information we can get to through a filter. Sometimes people request filters that are too complex and ultimately they have to be done via reports rather than a simple filter. So just kind of some housekeeping right off the top here, because I am going to be regularly bouncing back and forth into this My Task page to show some of the work that I'm doing as I'm training on it. And I didn't want anybody to be kind of thrown off by that. By the way, in the task page, unlike in dashboard view, for any of those of you who are using this dashboard view up here at the top, it'll show larger block size task cards. Lots of advantages to using the task page instead of the dashboard. There's twice as much functionality. It's all the exact same data, but it's a lot more bite size given that the task page is broken down into the 4 separate assignment areas. And the other huge advantage in My Tasks is that I can sort things by any of these column headers. So once I apply a filter to any of the data here, I can click any of the column headers to sort ascending or descending. For example, I could sort it by the task type by selecting the task column header. This is descending, and then I could also do ascending. So now it's grouped them all by application intake, by staff review, by staff report and decision, and so on and so on. Okay. This for anybody who's brand new to the system, if you have not taken our Accelo 101 basic training, I highly recommend that you get that under your belt, because some of the things that I'm talking about and demonstrating today are around new user training type items. Okay, so if you're lost at all, you can shoot us questions at the end if you're brand new to the system, and we'll get you kind of squared away for Accelo 101 or help you with some of your immediate tasks. Okay, I am going to kick off the training by creating a new application. I am going to cheat and get into Clatsop County data here real quick. I'm simply going into the record list so I can cheat and get a parcel number. I'm not familiar with Clatsop County's parcel numbers, so I just need to copy and paste, kind of cheat here and grab a parcel number before I can kick off an application. Okay, 2 ways to create an application, either through the record list using the new button or through the dash or through the Launchpad, forgive me, create new record. Same, they do the same thing. They kick off a new application. As of June, we kind of have a new record structure. You can simply start typing here in the record search and get any of the matching record types for what you're typing. If I were to put in tracking and so on. So I'm going to create a planning tracking application. That is the application type for the planning module. It is a one-size-fits-all, so to speak, for all of the different application types that each individual agency wants to offer. The application type options are customizable to the agency level. I'm going to go ahead and kick off creating my application here. The reason I'm going back to creating an application is, one, so we can talk about why we ask, what we ask for, what's minimally required, essentially just how to get through the intake process here. There is no online option for planning application, not at this time, not yet. It is highly requested, so we are in fact exploring options for allowing online application for planning. It would be something your agencies would opt into or opt out of, so just note that it would be an option. It is parcel based in planning. The planning application is parcel based because there can often be lots of different types of planning actions and application types that are on undeveloped parcels where there is no structure yet. When there's no structure, there's no address. So the planning module is in fact parcel based. All that means is that a parcel is minimally required to create a planning application. And out of the box, Acela offers us an address-based application model. That's why we are not yet able to offer Public Works or planning application online, because both of those are parcel-based. So we have to develop a parcel-based application model for ourselves. And that's a bit of an undertaking. So that is something that is definitely on our radar. I just want agencies to know. We do offer a tree record type, which is outside of the planning tracking record type. It is a standalone record type that's available. It's available for online application, but that's because we used the address-based application structure for that. So we can offer the tree record type to any of your agencies that have a tree maintenance or, any sort of tree program. And we can offer online application for the tree record type. However, please note that they would have to have an address, like an actual house address, to be able to apply. So just to kind of put that out there. If you do not yet have the tree record type as a standalone record type and you might be interested in it, please submit a help desk ticket and we could get you more information. All right. So notice since June, all the little application fields look all squishy and awful with our upgrade. Thank you, Acela. However, I want to bring your attention, there's this little double-headed arrow button up at the top of the application window. As soon as I hit that, it will expand most of the intake fields to readability. If you scroll down here, most of them are okay, but like here in address, they're pretty scrunchy. Once I do that, now they're not any longer. These that are still kind of scrunchy are, that's my official term for it, are parcel attribute type fields, and these are at the local agency level. So just to note, if by any chance you are using these fields to actually create applications, please reach out to us, let us know, and we can look at fixing your local form on that level. But this little double-headed arrow is kind of a super helper, and so many users don't know that it exists, so note on that. Project name. Project name is not a required field on the application. However, we highly recommend in planning that you use it, and that in the project name field that you include the application type that the customer or the applicant is applying for. And that is because application type is not available information at the record list level. And what I mean by that is if I go back here to the record list, application type is not one of the fields available to me here. So if we were not putting information in the project name field here, all we would see is that these are all planning, tracking, or code enforcement records, and that's all we would see, other than potentially a description, but we only get about 30 to 50 characters of the description field. So if the description was not crystal clear in the first couple of characters, we wouldn't even know what this top application was for. However, use of the project name field, as you can see here by example in Clatsop County, is highly recommended because now they're putting in information that is much more helpful at the bird's eye view here, like at the record list level. They've come up with kind of a system at Clatsop County. Most agencies do, land use compatibility study. I don't know what DP stands for. Gail might be able to tell me, but these, capitalized indicators here are probably somewhat specific or very specific to their application types that they offer in Clatsop County. So, the project name field can be super helpful. Notice here it says grading and maybe an owner name, perhaps Anderson, or a company name or some sort here, some sort of reference that's meaningful to Clatsop County users. And here it just says new single family dwelling. So if somebody had not filled in the project name here with some sort of reference to the type of application, new single family dwelling would probably not be terribly helpful, right? And you can see as you scroll over, just for those of you who are newer to planning, you can see the parcel number that's attached to the application, an address, if there is an address. Notice some of these, there is not an address indicated. This top one's a code enforcement, but this bottom one here looks like it's a planning application. You can see the status, the current status of the application, the date it was opened, the date it is tentatively set to expire. If there's any outstanding fee balance, meaning fees have been invoiced, but they are not fully paid yet, you can see this bottom record has a balance. The owner name is indicated here. Who created the record, meaning of the staff users for your agency who actually created the record. And then this last record ID is what we call a CAP ID. This is pretty much only helpful to e-permitting folks when we're helping support you and find records in the database for you. So just kind of a little heads up about what's being provided here, because that's important to our conversation about the application. So in my test record, I'm going to say that this is an annexation. Annexation of new parcel into city. I don't know. I am not a planner, so don't laugh if I if I say something wrong here. But just as an example, inclusion of the description of work, that is required. Notice too, in the light blue-gray banners at the top of each section, it will tell you if that section is even required. So the record details section is required. The parcel is required. If I were to continue to scroll, this section is not required. An address is not required to create a planning application. An owner is, because a parcel is. Parcels are owned by somebody, some business, trust, whatever it might be. There is always an owner. I'll just show you here. An applicant is minimally required. An agent for applicant is not required. This is just your ability to add additional people to the application that might be of good help to you or reference. Professionals, this is licensed professionals, contracts, architects, engineers. We don't call this contractors because it includes a lot more licensed professional type people that you do business with that are not in fact called contractors, like architects and engineers. This section is not required, but it's obviously available to you. And then, of course, the planning tracking section that gets into kind of some of the details about the individual application. Okay, so I'm going to start from the top. Every application in Acela always starts with this top segment of information. It's always the who, what, where, why, when kind of idea. What are they doing? Where are they doing it, which is the property data, the parcel, the address, the owner, and who is involved in the project, applicant, agent for applicant, and any licensed professionals. Okay, so the top of this application is everywhere throughout Acela, all modules, building, public works, planning, and in fact, even code enforcement. So just a note on that, as you get good in maybe one module, you're going to be able to apply those same skills anywhere. We do have to have a parcel, like I mentioned, in order to start a planning application. I want to let you know, however, that we have an option available in the system in Oregon e-permitting called named parcels, where you have application types that might occur somewhere that is not tax lot numbered, like right of way, in the right of way. If you have things like amendments, perhaps, is an application type, but it's not really parcel related, you know, it's not really what the nature of that kind of application might be. We can create like a named parcel that's like called city or city amendment or, you know, whatever you want to call it. We can create parcels like that are names rather than actually tied to tax lots through your tax assessment database or data, but that allow you to create applications still for those things that are not necessarily parcel or tax lot numbered. So keep that in mind. If you need any sort of named parcels available in your agency, you could submit a help desk ticket, and or you can reach out through the help desk and we can provide you with the, I think Krista or Stacy, can one of you please post that training document in the chat, please? So there'll be some information posted in the chat by the end of the session here about named parcels. And it has some examples from agencies, existing agencies that might help, you know, kind of get the juices flowing if you have some ideas about what you might want to do there. But it's out of necessity typically that these come up, because you'll go to create an application for something and you'll be like, huh, how do I create an application for something in the right of way that isn't tax lot numbered, or this amendment is not about an individual tax lot. However, standard application, I did cheat, if you recall, at the top of the session, and just grabbed a parcel number that exists in the Clatsop County property data. And I put that into the parcel number field here. Now I need to let you know, you cannot just free type into the property data fields. You must put in a piece of searchable information, essentially a tax lot number, house address, what have you. You have to search them to the agency's property data, their reference data that's already been loaded to the agency. And the reason that is that you have to validate this piece of information, right? The reason that's a requirement is that we don't want applications in any module created on bad data. Typos in parcel numbers that aren't even in your jurisdiction. I mean, yada, yada. The examples are kind of endless in terms of all of the errors that could potentially be made around property data. And that property data is ever important to your success in terms of associating addresses, parcels, and owners to your applications. We, for those of you who are brand new or newer to your agency, we have already established relationships with all of your agencies for getting regular updates of property data from your agency. Parcels sell, parcels get split or merged. You know, there's new owners is a big one. Property sells, right? At some time, new addresses being assigned, like new subdivision, new lots, that kind of thing. And so property data is ever changing. So we work with the agencies closely. Most agencies, I say that kind of loosely, but most agencies send us property data updates monthly. And we load that on behalf of agencies so that it's available and as current as it kind of can be, at least current to about the month or so, for you to be able to create applications from. However, there could be some cases, on rare occasion, where you put in a parcel number, you search for it, and it is not found. You cannot create an application at that point on a parcel that does not exist in the agency's property data. So at that point, you would have to typically work with whoever is kind of managing the agency's property data. Oftentimes it's a GIS analyst or an IT person, but inquire with your manager or your lead about who that might be. There are certain staff within your team that have the ability through the Launchpad to add new addresses, parcels, and owners as appropriate. But there's often a lot of research that goes into validating or confirming, you know, that the parcel number that you were provided on the application is even correct, that it even exists in your jurisdiction, you know, who the current owner is it on the tax roll? You know, there's oftentimes a little bit of research necessary before new property data is just manually added to the agency's, we call it APO, address parcel owner. And so just a note on that, if you're trying to create an application and you cannot validate the parcel that was provided to you. All right, we do have a training document for managing your APO, and we can put that into the chat as well. I put in my parcel number. Remember, I have to validate the property data, so I have to search for a match. The system comes back and says, okay, yeah, Kelly, there is a matching parcel. There is no address, which means I could safely assume it's an undeveloped parcel, meaning no structure on the parcel yet. And I have the owner here, and it says, do you want any of this attached information? Well, sure, I do. I want the owner. There's no address, so no need for me to, nothing for me to select there. And I'm going to include the owner on my application. So not only did it find the match and drop that parcel number in with all the parcel detail, but it also added the owner down here under the owner section. You can add multiple parcels and multiple owners to an application, or multiple addresses, just so you know. If you are searching by the address to find something, or there are multiple addresses, you can use address in order to pull in the parcel and owner information if there's a structure on the property. You can search either by the parcel to get the parcel or search by the address to get the parcel, you know, kind of either or depending on what's applicable. And I can do multiples. I can hit search again and add a second parcel. I could hit search and add another add an address and another parcel that's associated to that other address, and so on. With each attached parcel would come an associated owner. All right, moving on to applicant. I have these quick buttons here as owner and as licensed professional. Well, I've already pulled in an owner, MBE Investments. However, I have not populated licensed professional. So I'm going to let you know that in terms of the order of things here in the application process, if a licensed professional is part of this application in any way, I suggest that you skip the applicant section and you come down here and fill in the professionals. I am going to go ahead and add an architect. Oftentimes in planning, it can be architects or engineers that you're doing business with. I'm going to search I don't have this architect's license number at hand, so I am going to say I'm searching for an architect license, and his last name is Ped, but that's all I know. I could search his last name in the last name field, but I also know it's part of his business name. So I'm using a wildcard smart search here to search for his information. A percent before means anything could be before his last name, and the percent wildcard after means anything could come after his name, because I don't know the exact business name. So I'm going to go ahead and search. Reference or licensed professionals, licensed professionals are also something that you have to search to and validate. Now, on licensed professionals, however, you don't have to feed us that information. We provide it to all of our participating agencies. Every single night, we update CCB and professional licenses like electrical or BCD licensed professionals, electrical and plumbing. We load those and update them every single night. So you can count on that data being current to the day, meaning if a license is still valid or not valid. You cannot add an invalid license to an application. The system won't allow you to do that. Now, for architects and engineers and all the other types of licensed professional data that we load, like landscape contractors and all the on-site professionals and whatnot, we load those about every other month or so, as often as those licensing bodies provide us with the data, with the updates. So architect, searching, I know his last name's Ped. I'm going to search to try to validate. Maybe I'm going to search. Oh, there it is, just slow. Oh, look at that. Oh, there. So because of my wildcard search, anything before PED, anything after PED, I got a couple of matches. There he is, Ronald James Ped, architect. But I also got Stuart Coppage because PED is in the middle of his last name. I also got Ronald James Ped as an actual architect. This is his business, and this is his individual architect license. I got Peterson because PED. I got Ron Ped's business again, but notice it's a duplicative number, 0358 and 358. That's something on our end, so don't worry about that, but yes. And then I got Pedro because PED, and I got Peterson because of PED. I can stretch this window out if I can get a hold on it there, and just show you the license expiration date. Any of these licenses, you cannot add an expired license to an application. But I found him, there he is. I'm going to select the one that matches what I have, and I am going to add him to the application. Now that I've added a licensed professional to the application, I can come back up here to applicant and use my as licensed professional quick button. That's the only reason I would ever suggest filling it in out of order. You know, if it was the owner, I already have the owner, so we would have been fine to use as owner. But licensed professional, because Ron is the applicant, I had not filled in the licensed professional yet, so just scrolled down, filled it in, then came back up to applicant and used my quick button. Now it asks you requires minimally phone number for your applicant. It does not require email, although I highly recommend putting it in. There's tons of email functionality to be had in the system, and you'd really be kind of cutting yourself short if you were not collecting email on any people that you associate to an application. I'm going to put my email in just so as we train anything that gets sent out, I can actually show you the email that gets sent out firsthand. Agent for applicant, not required. This would just be any other people that you want to add to the application. So just a note on that. They do not have to be searched against reference data. You can free type in an agent for applicant or a contact. We added our licensed professional because in this case, we're going to say that the architect actually applied for this in preparation, maybe for a new home build that he's going to submit for in the future or what have you. Now we get into the planning application kind of meat and potatoes here, right? All of the intake detail for the actual planning application. Now, at the top of the meeting, I mentioned that the planning tracking record type is a bit of a one size fits all. We had to make this record type, one, work for cities and counties, and then two, we had to make sure that it met most, and I use that word carefully, but most of the planning action activities that agencies need to conduct and track. So there's a lot of extraneous information on here that you may or may not end up using depending on what kind of application it is. In my example, I said it was an annexation. Notice the application type field has a red star, which means it is required. And wouldn't you know it, I said annexation and Clatsop County doesn't have an annexation record type. The application type drop-down values are customized at the agency level. So Clatsop County determined what these values are, what they want to use and what they want to create. Here, I'll fake it here. I'll do sorry, didn't mean to pick that. I'll do a property line adjustment. I'll scroll back up here. You know, I don't know, between two homes. I'm not sure how that works. Two properties or what have you. Maybe at that point, if it is a property line adjustment, I wouldn't want to include two parcels. Just saying. Whatever kind of, you know, system your agency is using for project name, that's a property line adjustment. Maybe they use PLA, maybe they spell out property line adjustment. You know, check with your other planners, lead manager if you're new to your agency and you're not sure what would be put in here. So I'm going to zip back down. I'm doing that just because Clatsop County didn't have an annexation record type that or application type that I could see here real quickly. So property line adjustment. Now, process type is the type typically that associates to different types of planning applications. Forgive me, but I do not know what type a property line adjustment would be. So I'm just, just on a training note, filling in information here. Internal tracking number. So some agencies have a hard file numbering system that is something more of an internal type numbering system that isn't the same as the number that Acela produces. Now, do you have to have an internal tracking numbering system? Absolutely not. You don't. But if you do, for instance, some agencies do this. They'll do the PLA, property line adjustment, 22 being the year band, and this is the 13th property line adjustment application that's come in this year. Some agencies have these kind of hard file numbering systems, and they use them to maybe track numbers or things like that. I do want to let you know that you could get all that same kind of data out of the software through reporting, but where there is oftentimes a hard file, a job jacket, like physical paper in my hand kind of thing. Sometimes this can be really helpful. Notice it's not required, but if you have an internal numbering system, this could be helpful for you. You can indicate the zoning. These drop-down values are also customized by the local agency. So what is provided here is the same values on 1 and 2. It's just that if it has for any reason, maybe more than one zoning type or what have you, then you can make two different selections. Maybe part of the property is one type and part of the property is something else. But just so you know that you do, if it's dual zoned in any way, you can select two separate zoning selections. For farm and forest use is a reporting mechanism. So if your agency does this, if you wanted to select that, that would be make this record be included on a farm and forest use report. Use category. This is also a customized list that allows you to kind of further qualify this application by maybe its use category. These values are provided specifically by Clatsop County because this is a custom list. Comp plan designation, same thing. Now, would a comp plan designation apply when it's a property line adjustment? To be very honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking that as a rhetorical question because notice none of these other fields are required. There are no red stars anywhere else. I can tell you right now, for the remainder of all this other remaining information that you could potentially elect to fill in at intake, none of it is required because it leaves it up to you as the agency to say, when I'm taking in a property line adjustment application, what does the agency need to know? What do we need to record? Now, I'm going to tell you also, though, kind of the downside to some small degree is don't take the easy route and not fill in a bunch of information and go, oh, well, it's on the application they gave us. The more you put in, the more we can report on for you. If you're putting in hardly any information, then there's hardly anything that you can pull a report on. If you're putting in pretty good information, then you can get much better reports. The amount of information that you elect to enter into the software will determine the value of your reporting. Okay, just going to put that, do my due diligence and put that out there in the wind, okay? Now, if a comp plan designation doesn't really have a place when you're doing a property line adjustment application, then don't fill in that field. If current use, sorry, might get my sweater off there. If current use, projected use has a role, I'm just making silliness up here, before and after, then I could fill in a current use or a proposed use if that made sense for a property line adjustment application. You can record surrounding use. You can record the number of existing units, proposed units, affordable housing units, total units. Would affordable housing have a role in a PLA? I don't know, probably not, I'm estimating. But in terms of the initiative for planning to track affordable housing inventory, you do have fields in which to do that when and if it's appropriate, depending on the application type. Existing number of lots, proposed, total, numbers of acres, impervious surface, existing, new, total, proposed, building related information, existing square footage, new, total, if it's footprint only or gross floor area, and then some tree detail. If you do not elect to use the standalone tree record type, which you don't have to, it's an option, then you can include trees as one of your single record type options here, application type, excuse me, and do trees inside of the planning tracking application. You can do it either way. The benefit to doing the standalone tree record, of course, is that we can then offer it online if you're interested. So just a side note. But there's some tree data, existing trees, number of trees to be removed, planted, replanted. Now, the remainder of the intake form, the remainder of the planning application would only apply commensurate to the application type. So I would only fill in the pre-application section if this was an application for a pre-app. If that makes sense, right? So if I scroll back up here and I look at the different application types, pre-app conference is one of the app types. In that event, if that's what the customer is applying for, then I would expect you to also fill in the pre-application section. These values are customized by the local agency. If this was, and I'm not going to say they don't apply per se for an appeal, but they might appeal. And I'll talk about this later in the session, but you could manage the appeal separate from the original application. I'm going to tell you right now, I recommend that. It is a lot cleaner in the way Acela handles the data and the records to handle the appeal in a separate record from the original application that's being appealed and then relate the two together. Just put that out there, but we'll talk more about that. So if this was an appeal to an existing application, then appeal would be one of the application types. Here's appeal. If that was the case, then I would expect that you'd be filling in, boop, I went too far, the appeal section here. You get the, oh, and the file number of the project being appealed. In my recommendation that you would manage the appeal as a separate record from the original application and decision, you would put the original application or decision number here. Relate the records together. If this was about floodplain, not only is, so if your planning agency issues floodplain permits, then you would expect, or we would expect that floodplain would be one of the options here. Notice it is in Clatsop County, floodplain type 1 and type 2. If this was a floodplain application permit, we would expect that you'd fill in the floodplain development section. Now, I need to let you know that you can fill in the floodplain development section even if the application isn't for a floodplain permit. You could fill in the floodplain development section as informational. So maybe they're applying for a property line adjustment, and you might also want to record some floodplain information about the parcel in question, or that's party to the application. You are able to fill in the floodplain information in any case for floodplain reporting purposes. Trees. So if you don't use a standalone tree record type, and instead you use just an application type inside the planning tracking record, then I would expect you'd fill in the tree information. Lastly, long-range planning. Again, there are certain types of potentially of things that would be considered or qualified as long-range planning. of your application types. If that's the case, then I would expect you'd be filling in some of the long range planning. All of the drop downs for these bottom sections are also all custom to the local agency. Your agency tells us what values you want in all of these drop downs. Well, not this one. This just comes from National Floodplain. But, you know, any of these drop downs that have individual values. So if you're an existing agency and you find that you need something new, like maybe a new application type, I have seen the different marijuana type licensing and permitting and things like that. I've seen a lot of new application types come to planning around that. But, you know, as things kind of trend or become required for zoning or, you know, planning purposes, you could certainly add new application types over time. Maybe you decide that on partitions, yeah, we've been using the single partition application type for a couple years now, but really there's kind of, I'm just making this up, really there's kind of two types. There's like partition A and there's partition B, you know, so Kelly, can we update our application list to now say partition A and partition B? And yes, we can. So just so you know that as things ebb and flow in the world of planning at your local agency, as things become locally adopted or requirements in your jurisdiction, that kind of idea, any of these custom drop downs can be continuously edited. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just cover these last pieces, and then we'll jump into pretty much, we're going to jump right into workflow. You have the ability in planning and in public works, FYI, to track your time. We hear sometimes that can be very important at the case management level or at the code enforcement case level. Don't forget, code is inside of planning. It's not in the tracking record, but just a note, you have the option in anywhere in planning module to track your time. You would put in, you know, how much time, 15 minutes. Today, it automatically drops in my logged in user because I'm doing the application, and I'm going to put administrative and I'm going to put here intake. So if you need to track time, the time tracking table, I know it doesn't look like a table, but effectively it is. You're just adding rows, row after row after row kind of thing. If you need to track the time on a given case or a set of applications that are party to a larger city project or initiative, any of that kind of stuff, you can ultimately, this time tracking is available on the planning record for the life of the record, not only at intake. If this is an application for a sign, we would expect to see some sign application types up here. There's a sign permit. In that event, I would I would add a row with all of the sign details. And I'm not going to go over these because there is a ton of them. Everything from the type of sign, the type of work about the sign, the type of sign, balloons and banners and sandwich boards and outdoor advertising and blah, 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 all kinds. If permits are required, footages, weights, dimensions, sign faces, nits of illumination, that's, new-ish in the last 5 years. I think we added that about the brightness. That became an important thing to appear somewhere. Oh, type of illumination, and then the nits, the measure of the brightness for like lit scoreboards and billboards and all that new stuff, right? So if this is a sign application, I would expect to see that you would add a row of sign detail. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. If this was a tree application, I'm going to tell you right now that this information right here is the same as the information if I added the row. So not really necessary in this case specifically. Floodplain, if this was a floodplain permit, this information here is the same information as in this table. You might wonder then, Kelly, why are trees and floodplain on here if the data's up here? And that's because the trees and floodplain, this is added to other record types kind of as a template. So they're kind of floodplains available everywhere. Building, public works, planning, all record types. So it's just a little bit of the technicality of how the software is designed. Just as a side note, you would not need to fill out floodplain up here, trees here, and do this. It would be totally repetitive. So don't waste your time. Documents, you can attach electronic documents to the record at intake or at any point in time of the life of the record. Now I'm going to go ahead and submit my application. We talked about all the gory details. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. It's just taking its sweet time there. So upon creating a new application in any module, honestly, you have the option to pre-pend or AKA proactively add any required field inspections to the application at intake. If your agency doesn't do field inspections, you could completely forget about this and just cancel out of it. If your agency does do field inspections for planning, you might want to consider this. It's totally optional. I do need to let you know that any incomplete, unfinished, unscheduled inspection could prevent the record from closing when you're all done with the application. So just keep in mind that less is more when it comes to potentially pending inspections. The other thing about pending inspections is they are strictly a suggestion to the applicant. There is nothing that makes the applicant schedule it. So keep that in mind as well. You could add, let's just pretend, add all 4 of these. You know, you make your selections, you hit the arrow, it adds it to the record and so on. You could add all of these and the customer might only schedule 1 of the 4. So just keep in mind, they are suggestions only when it comes to pending, but they can be helpful in certain cases. In code enforcement, I train that at intake, they should add the initial inspection right at intake, because in code enforcement, it's an internal only record type. It is fully redacted from the customer. It's not available online, not searchable online, nothing. It's an internal tool only. So for the code officers, it's very helpful to add the initial inspection at intake and then eventually schedule that fairly soon after receiving the complaint to go out in the field and validate whether the complaint is real or bogus, in part or in whole. So just a note on code enforcement. I'm going to not pend anything and cancel out of this. Oops. I had that other window when I hit search, it didn't come up. Okay, I'm in Clatsop County Staging. I'm on the record list. I don't see my new application. I need to let you know that any of the list pages in Acela are not good at refreshing automatically. So there is a little recycle looking small circular arrow. I'm circling around up here in the upper right hand corner. Force the page to refresh. Where did it go? There it is. So there's my application at the top there. I'm going to go ahead and click the link to open the application. All right, so the same record structure is everywhere in Acela. There, as soon as this loads, there's a series of tabs. This is called the navigation pane, and each of these tabs is just a part of the record. The record's been assigned this number. This numbering format is 186, identifies Clatsop County specifically. So the first 3 digits identify your agency. The next are year band, the year the record was created in, and the 6 digits is a record sequence generator starting at 5 zeros and a 1 at the beginning of every year. The PLNG is the actual record type, planning, tracking. Okay. This top banner, this header row we see up here is new as of June. It shows you some of the high level pertinent pieces of information. Shows you the project name, PLA, the description of work. Notice I get a little pencil where I can edit that if I need to. Shows you the current record status and the one step prior or previous status. Location is the property data, none provided because there's no house numbered street address. There's only a parcel and an owner. Notice those are also clickable. That can be very helpful. The contact, meaning any of the people attached to the record, I attached, he was the applicant. And I have his phone number and his email, which is really me. And then I have a high level view of the workflow showing me simply that there are 7 tasks in the planning workflow. None of them have been completed. 1 is active and it's application intake waiting for me. Up next would be potentially some of these other tasks that are available in planning. Now for the planning focus training, first hour is kind of like the application. Why do we collect what we collect? What are some of the different nuances about creating a planning application? Named parcels. You have to search a parcel. Minimally, a parcel is required to even create an application. Can't create an application on a parcel that you cannot validate through the agency's APO. Cannot add licensed professionals that where their licenses are expired and whatnot. Can add multiple addresses, multiple parcels to a given application, either at intake or once you create the record, you can now go back in and add an address, add more parcels, and so on. Okay, some of the kind of that we talked about, some of the nuances of the custom drop downs, the application type, depending on the application type would define what else you were going to fill in at intake. Now, everything that we saw at intake is available post intake. So no harm, no foul. If you miss something at intake, fill in the bare minimums, get the record created, and you can come back to the record to fill in any of those pieces you didn't get to fill in at intake. All of the intake detail lives in the O1 Planning Tracking tab. So here's everything repeated again, starting at general information down. Everything repeated. However, we have a new section here now, a reference number and dates section. Internal tracking number, if you remember at intake, I did put in an internal hard file tracking number. It carried that forward. Any other reference numbers that might be of importance for you to track or document for the life of the record or for the permanent record is a final order number, an ordinance number, a resolution number, an annexation number. Pertinent dates that are very important in the planning process, the completeness determination date. This is automatically populated from workflow. So just a note on that. Appeal deadline. You can document this. The expiration date is automatically set based on decisions that the agency made when they came on to e-permitting. There's a free text notes field here for pretty much anything you might need to camp on to the record. If you need to change or edit or add anything that you didn't do at intake, you can do so here and save your changes. All right, those tables, if you remember, the time tracking, the sign, the floodplain, etc. Those are available post intake to you on the custom tables tab. There they are. So if this was there's my time tracking entry. Notice it's showing under time tracking. There's my entry I made at intake. If you wanted to do more entries for time tracking, I would just add a row and fill in more information and so on. If you need to access one of the other tables, you simply flip the drop down. Sign, add a row, fill in the information. Floodplain, add a row, fill in the information and so on. So those bottom 4, what we call application tables, are under this custom table tab. So you have access to those post intake. All right. Fees do not automate in planning. They have to be manually added. They're not predictable enough. And building fees automate based on what you put in on the application form, automatically populates fees. They're not predictable in that way in planning. Plus, this record type is a one size kind of fits all. So we don't know what kind of application it might be for. So fees, to add a fee, I would hit the add fee button. It defaults to the planning tracking fee schedule. These are Clatsop County fees. And I would go through here and select whatever fee was appropriate. So because my fake application is a property line adjustment, I'm going to select that fee. I'm going to submit to add that fee to my application. $241. If I'm working with a customer literally over the counter, standing right in front of me, I might want to checkbox, invoice this fee and collect payment all at intake, right? If the customer is not standing in front of me and you want them to pay online, online payment is an elective option for planning departments. Your agency can opt in to allow planning payments online, or they can opt out of allowing planning payments online. If you're not sure what your agency is doing, please reach out to your manager or your lead and find out if your agency accepts online payments for planning. Building's a default, Public Works is a default, but planning, it's optional. If your agency is accepting online payments, the minute that you checkbox and invoice a fee, you are making it available to be paid, either over the counter or online. So just note that as you consider allowing online payment. The only reason I mentioned that, and I'm not going to get into it in this training, is that if the customer is paying online, they are essentially paying with a credit card. It's the only way to pay online at this point. And the fact that they're paying with a credit card means there'll be an approximate 3% credit card processing fee that the agency will have to pay. So keep that in mind as you decide which fees you might invoice and make available for online payment. If this is a $50,000, I'm making it up, a $50,000 fee, 3% of $50,000 would be excruciating, right? And your agency isn't probably going to want to pick up the tab on that 3%. So you would likely not invoice a high dollar fee to make it available for online payment. At that point, you would probably require the applicant to come in and pay over the counter. Now, just because they come in and they pay over the counter doesn't mean they're not still going to hand you a credit card. And if they hand you a credit card, whether you're using the e-permitting credit card processing service, which is called Converge, it doesn't matter. Somebody is processing credit cards over the counter for you, whether it's your local county or city bank, whether it's a web service that your city or county is contracted with, somebody is processing your over-the-counter credit card payments. You are very likely still going to pay a processing fee. So if you are not allowing online payment for high dollar fees in planning, it's likely that you should not allow online or credit card payments over the counter either, because it's same, right? So if you were steering a customer into the office to pay a planning fee over the counter, it's likely that you are then only allowing it to be paid with check or cash. So just a small conversation on that. Again, if your agency doesn't currently allow online payments for planning and you would like to do that, just reach out to us through a help desk ticket. It requires a small amount of configuration. Okay. Have to invoice a fee before it can be paid. So I'm going to go ahead and invoice this fee for our demonstration today, and then I'm going to go down to pay. I'm going to just pretend, they're standing at the counter with me. I invoice the fee to make it available for payment, and the guy is going to write me a check. So I'm going to go to payment. I'm going to initiate a payment by selecting the pay button. I'm going to change it to check because that's what he's given me. Soon as I say it's check, the check number field becomes required. Whatever the check number is on the physical check. The payer, whoever the payer is listed on the physical check, you select this picker. We'll say that the check is coming from MBE Investments. If the payer that is listed on the physical check does not show in the people list of the people that are already attached to the record, then you would go to the contacts tab and create a new contact for payer to add them to the record. It takes seconds to do. I have a lot of agencies are like, oh, I just did this, Kelly. I just free typed in his name as it appeared on the check because he wasn't attached to the record. He wasn't in this list. So I just free typed his name. Now the system technically will allow you to do this, but I can tell you that this is not audit worthy. Because all this is going to do is record Mickey Mouse's name on this one individual payment receipt report, and that is it. So if Mickey Mouse stopped payment on this check, or if this check bounced or what have you, you have no information about Mickey Mouse, nor is he attached to the record in any sort of meaningful way. So you don't have any way to reach back out to them if they should stop payment or bounce the check or what have you. So it is very, very important in the financial side of things for an audit-worthy payment that if the person, the payer, as listed on the check does not appear to be an attached party already, go to the contacts tab, add a new contact. Again, takes seconds to add them as a payer. Just a quick minute of financial training there. Okay, and any sort of note, if there's any note you want to, it'll appear on the receipt. So if there's anything you want to write in here, it's not required, and you save the payment. The receipt report will automatically generate and pop up. You have the ability to email the receipt. So there's email functionality number 1. Even if they're standing right in front of you, I would invite you now these days to ask the customer if they want a printed receipt or if they want it emailed. 50 to 60% of the time, they're going to opt to have it emailed. Saves you printing, paper, printer maintenance, all that adds up over time when you're doing thousands of permits and records and whatnot, right? Because a lot of them want it emailed now, because then they have that email and they can put it with their project documentation or what have you. So just to note, you have the option to send email. I could send that receipt immediately to them, even if they're standing right in front of me. Okay. Any report that's automatically generated by this system is automatically saved to the documents tab. So if I printed out of course not. If I printed out the hard copy, that should have been attached, but we're in a practice environment. If I print out a copy of that receipt because he said he wanted a hard copy and he was going to give it, to the GM or whatever, he leaves with the receipt somewhere in his truck, it gets lost or whatever, and they call and they want another copy of the receipt. You could go to the documents of the record and the receipt should be displayed there. In our practice environment, I'm not sure why it's attaching, but I can tell you right now in production, it attaches. So the receipt would be available for you here. You'd be able to open it and reprint it or download it or what have you. Okay. All right, moving along quickly now to workflow. This is where it all happens with planning. There is a workflow document that you would need to have in hand. If you're a new user, learn it. That's all that bottom line. Learn this diagram. I'm going to make it much larger here because this is imperative to using the planning tracking record to the highest level of functionality that it's designed for. This document, Krista, Stacy, would one of you be able to post that to the chat, please?
Yeah, I'll grab it.
Thank you so much. Okay. First, I'm going to show this diagram, talk about it briefly, and then I'm going to go to the workflow and show you how it applies. So let's kind of bounce back and forth here momentarily. So I'm on the workflow tab. Remember, the workflow is the life cycle of the record from beginning to end, whatever that constitutes. in planning, all I did was click the up next so I can show you. Starts at app intake where you deem it complete or not. Deeming it complete starts the clock. You have the option of a pre-app meeting. Just as a note, this is an optional task. However, traditionally, once you deem it complete, it goes to staff review. Staff review is performed one shape or form, and then it goes to staff report and decision. You decide or determine if a hearing is required, depending on the application type, city, county, what have you. An appeal option is available for you inside of the application. But if you recall, I had mentioned to you that it is cleaner in Acela and it'll make your life a lot simpler to manage an appeal as a separate record and then just relate the two together through this related records tab right here. You know, just linking them together. This would be the original application. It goes through review and decision, and then it has like a 90-day open appeal period. There's a way to track the appeal. I'll get to here momentarily. And if they appeal, then you would create a new record for the appeal and attach it to this PLA application. So let's talk through that a little bit as we go through the workflow. Wanted to show you what the tasks were in the planning workflow. Each of those tasks is commensurate to this column on this training document. So under application intake task, I'm going to go ahead and click it open. You just click it once to open the task. There is a status dropdown, and there are a lot of choices here. Those choices are represented here. So for every task that is available in the planning workflow, these are the available options. This diagram shows you what the system is going to do when you choose each one of these. Additional info needed will not advance the workflow. There'll be no change to workflow, and it'll update the record status as additional info needed. And I'll talk about additional info needed and receive. Once I receive the information, also no change. It will not advance the workflow, but the record status will update from additional info needed to in review. If you mark the application intake strictly as application accepted because you need some sort of interim intake process, maybe there's a handoff from front reception to the planner. Application accepted might be meaningful for you. There's no change in the workflow and the status of the record stays the same in review. If I deem the application incomplete, it stays in application intake. There is no change to the workflow, but the record status is updated to incomplete. If you deem it incomplete, ideally you're going to go back and ask for more information in order to get it to a place where it can be deemed complete. Ideally, right? That's why this deeming it incomplete stays in app intake. App submitted is just where the record starts when you create a new record. Of course, expired, void, and withdrawn. Expired and withdrawn are available on every single task. Expired, withdrawn. I scroll down here, expired is expired in there, withdrawn. Expired and withdrawn are available anywhere, because at any point in time, at any point in the process, the application could expire based on your local requirements. And at any point in time of the process, the applicant could withdraw. So withdrawn is available everywhere. Void is only available at app intake. Void would only be used if the application was completely created in error by the agency. So void is only available right at intake because hopefully you'd realize the record error right at the intake and you would void the record. Now, depending on what I select from pre-app down determines here in these colored sections what is going to happen. These colors correspond to the task. Pink, if I scroll down here, pink is closeout. Closeout's pink. So the colors are helpful. They're meaningful, just so you know. If at intake they requested a pre-app, it would go to the pre-app task. Would be the next step. If I selected pre-app requested, the workflow is going to advance to the pre-app meeting task. And then I'm going to be faced with these choices right here, this first column. If I deem it complete, the record workflow is going to advance to staff review. And then I have all of these choices. If I say right out of the gate, app intake, it's ready for a report and decision, it's going to skip staff review and go down to staff report and decision. And then I'm going to have these choices. Okay, now it's important that you, like I said, just bottom line, as a planner, you need to learn this document and or have it available to you for reference at all points in time until you learn the workflow. Because all of these choices are so important, right? They're going to do something or they're not going to do something, or they're going to advance to review, or they're going to skip review and go to staff report and decisions. Well, staff report and decision, well, that might be bad because maybe you need to do something that's available only in the staff review task. I'm going to ask you, don't get too wrapped around the axle for the names of the tasks. Some people balk that this is called staff review because they want to call it something else, or they don't like that this is called report and decision. They want it to just be called decision, or, there's lots of different, little pieces that might not be an exact square peg in a square hole. So I want to let you know, don't get too tied up in the naming of the task. Pay more attention to your process and of the status results, what they do related to your process. That is way more important than caring about what the task is called. And why I say that is application, so the standard flow, more or less, a majority of the time is you deem it complete, depending on, the requirements. It goes to staff review. Staff review, staff issues a tentative decision, an approval or a denial. Now, this is probably, of anything I've heard feedback on, this is probably the place I hear the most feedback. People don't like this word tentative. But I need to let you know, don't get too crazy about what it's called. Pay most attention to what it does. So in order to get to staff report and decision, I have to do one of these two status results, or I can't advance the workflow to staff report and decision, and I need to get to staff report and decision. So I either need to tentatively approve or tentatively deny. That will take me forward to staff report and decision, and then I can finally approve or final deny. Now, if I final approve or I final deny, it's going to close the record. And some people go, wait, Kelly, I don't want it to close the record. I want it to go to appeal. It doesn't do that. So I just want to put that out there right now. Only the hearing task has the option to move forward to appeal. Now, you might go, what the heck? There are things that don't require a hearing that do require an appeal period. This is why I tell you it is much easier to manage the appeal process in a separate record type than trying to manage it within the existing workflow. I suggest, and just bear this in mind, suggestion, but I suggest that you do a tentative approval denial, a final approval or denial. The record will close. I'll show you here momentarily that you will add an activity on the record for the appeal process. It's a timer, has a start date and an end date. You will add the activity timer to the application record for the appeal period. The record will close, but the activity timer will continue to work. And it will ping you when the appeal period is over. Or you'll track it. There's a way to track it through the task page. So you'll set the appeal period activity for however long the appeal period is, and then you'll issue final approval or denial, and the appeal period timer begins. Say it's 90 days. Say 36 days, the applicant comes in and appeals. Well, this application is closed. So you create a new record strictly for the appeal, and you relate it to this original application. And then you process the appeal on the new record. Sounds like a lot of talk. I know it's a lot of information, but I want to be really clear with you what these kind of two places that I hear a lot about. One is this word tentative, and I would just suggest don't get too crazy about it. But they are the only way for you to advance to staff report and decision. Now, if you hearing officer, planning commission, board of commissioners, city council, whatever kind of hearing, if a hearing is required, then you would select one of those four. Notice it's going to advance the workflow then to the hearing task. Hearing scheduled, no change. And it will create, you want to set the schedule date. There's an activity for this as well to correspond to the hearing information and details. Once the hearing's complete, denied, or denied, no appeal received. I mean, there's a couple different options here, right? If on the hearing note. Now, if it doesn't go to hearing and you just do final approval denial, we'll talk about the way to track the appeal process. Ultimately, it goes to closeout, jumps you down, closes the record. Learn this diagram. I can't really say it any other way other than it is imperative to learn that diagram in order to best use the planning workflow. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and talk real quickly about additional info needed. If at intake, they did not provide you with whatever your intake requirements are for planning. A map of something, and a paper application, whatever, 3 hard copy sets of plans, or you allow electronic submittals, whatever it might be. If they have not met your intake requirements, if you cannot deem it complete for whatever reason, then ask them for the additional information. As soon as I say additional info needed, notice I get these little red comments here. It is going to automatically, additional info needed is going to automatically, if I scroll down further down the task here, it's going to automatically email the applicant of record. It's going to automatically email the applicant of record whatever you write in this box. This is the body of the email. So I'm going to say, I don't know, we cannot deem your, or whatever, deem your application complete for the following, reasons. Need a copy of, copy of a map of your property. I'm just making things up here. Of your property, 2 additional hard copy sets of plans, and a site plan. That might be the same as the map, so now what comes next is up to your agency, and you'll have to either ask your lead, your manager, or make some decisions if you're an agency that you weren't aware of this kind of functionality. If you've already been using the system, for instance, what comes next is up to you guys. You can tell them to submit these required documents using the link provided in this email. In the workflow, because I'm in workflow, in the workflow emails, anything generated out of this section, there is a template that the system uses that includes a link online directly to this 414 planning PLA application. It's called a deep link. So you can't see it here. That's why I'm training you. I want you to know that it's there, that when this email is generated, it will have the deep link to their application prominently displayed in the email. So you can suggest to them to upload the documents electronically using the link provided in this email. However, if you do not allow electronic submittals for everything, you need to give them that guidance and instruction here. We do not accept electronic plans at this time. Please submit those to our office located at, 123 Main Street, whatever, making something up, okay? However, I mean, you can say, however, we do accept electronic submittals for the other documents requested. Use the link provided in this email to upload. So, to upload. This comment, when you ask for additional information, it needs some sort of local instruction and guidance. If you don't accept electronic submittals, then tell them you don't accept electronic submittals of anything, that they have to submit in hard copy to your local office. If you accept some things electronically, do something like what I wrote. If you do accept everything electronically, then just tell them, please upload all of the documents requested using the link provided in this email. This additional info needed email can be make or break your intake process. It can help make sure that you've received everything you require in order to deem this complete or what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, and by the way, additional info needed is a required email. So if I say additional info needed, I can't choose not to email. It's one of only 3 required emails in the entire system. Additional info needed and revisions needed will kick out an automatic email to the applicant to record. And notice that up here, revisions needed is available to you at staff review. So this would also kick out an email. Exactly like the one we're doing now. But there you would write some instructions like, your plans are not approvable as submitted. We require a material revision to include the following, blah, 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 blah. And then give them instructions on how to submit it. Upload it electronically using the link in the email, or you only accept paper or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run with the additional info needed. I'm going to submit that. Additional info needed, just as a back up here, is not going to advance the workflow, and it's going to update the record status to additional info needed. By the way, this header row is terrible at updating. So I want you to know that there's a little refreshing. So there's a little refresh symbol here. There, our status just updated. Says that Kelly on 10/3 changed the record from app submitted to additional info needed. By the way, if I don't want to see all this up next, I can minimize it, just have a clean view. So now I'm waiting. We're waiting, for the customer to respond and to submit what we asked them to submit. Now, if they submit it online, oh wait, let me open the email first to show it to you. Notice it says Clatsop County, additional info required on this record. No address, because there is no address on the record, right? There's only parcel. It says additional info is required on your permit. See comments below, and I put all that. There's the body of the email that I wrote. If you have questions, contact Kelly at phone number or email. Your record is available online here. There's that deep link. And then there's just general, contact info for the agency. So this information is generated by whoever the staff user is that is processing the workflow. Well, I was the one processing the workflow. So the email is going to default include your user information. Kelly Marshall at phone number 555-1212 or at this email. Because you cannot reply to this. No reply. So they do need to have your email information, either your larger agency, the ComDev or the ComDev here, or the individual staff user that requested the information. So if you are processing a planning record on behalf of a planner, let's say you're a planning tech or a front counter person, my suggestion is that when you go to ask for additional info on behalf of, we'll just use Gail as an example. Gail's the planner. She asks you to help, help do some of this work. So you say additional info needed. You can change this to be Gail's in planning. You can change it to be Gail. If Gail's contact information should be what is included in the email.
Kelly, you have a question.
Okay. No, Katie, unfortunately. So here's the I have an answer for that though. You're probably thinking some sort of like plan review type letter, potentially something in the, or an incomplete letter. What you can do is write that letter, generate that letter. It's not going to be generated by the system, but generate that letter in Word or wherever, attach it to the documents. If you're going to deem this incomplete, perhaps attach it to the documents, come into workflow, do that first, mark it as incomplete. Tell it requires a comment, by the way. Now, deeming it incomplete does not automatically require an email. So here I can elect to email the applicant, and I can put the message here. Please review incomplete letter in the documents on your application using the link provided in this email. So I can't attach the document per se, Katie, to the actual email, but I can put it in documents, which makes it available to the customer through that link provided in the email. So you can tell them to pull down this document, the incomplete letter, and you can opt to use workflow email notification when you tell them or when you deem this incomplete. I can put a comment in and I can choose to send this in an email, and I've given them the instructions to pull down the incomplete letter from the document using the link provided in the email. And the incomplete letter would be attached. Okay, so yeah, not a way to explicitly attach something in any of the workflow emails, but if you upload whatever it is that you wanted to attach to documents and then reference it in workflow and then tell them, and then choose to email them here and reference it. Here, tell them to go get it from documents. So it's kind of the same, but unfortunately kind of got to do it in two pieces. Okay, so once I ask for additional information, kind of going back to that, I'm going to get off workflow and go back. Once I ask for additional information and they submit it, okay, let's say they uploaded it. If they uploaded it, your agency is going to get an alert telling you that documents were uploaded on record 414 planning. And ideally, your planning tech or front counter type person is going to be monitoring and managing any incoming alerts. Oh, somebody's not muted. Just a note.
I think it's Christina.
Christina, can you mute, please? Christina, are you there? Can you mute, please? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So they submit it. You either get an alert telling you something was uploaded online. Alerts come via email, or alerts come directly to the alert page. Here I can show it to you in production, Clatsop Productions. It's easier to see. An alert would come in saying, a document has been uploaded, blah, 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 right? And so and it would be planning specific. So hopefully, a planning tech or somebody is kind of managing alerts either via email or using the alert list page. The Alert emails are an enhancement that e-permitting can configure for you. It is much easier to manage alerts in the email option than it is to manage them through the alert list page in Acela. And that's because that alert list page stinks. Acela kind of broke it recently-ish. It just doesn't work well. Sometimes when you click the record link from the alert page, it doesn't take you to the record, 1. 2, it takes you to the record, but the header row is completely blank and missing. It's very buggy. There are some issues with it. And there's always been kind of some shortfalls in that alert page option, the alert page. And so we, e-permitting, developed an enhancement to email alerts to a dedicated planning mailbox. It's a lot easier to manage because alerts expire in 5 days. So they'll come on the list page. So they'll come onto this page, and if you do not address them or manage them within 5 days, they're gone. And you didn't even know they were there. They're there and gone. But if you're using the email enhancement for alerts, which again is an option, if you're not sure if you have it, reach out to us through the help desk, or if you're interested in having it, reach out to us through the help desk. It just requires a few minutes of small configuration. But emailing them, then they can stay in the mailbox as long as it takes you in order to process any of the alerts. The alerts for planning would be payments, if you allow online payments, and always would be documents. So, or they come into the counter and they hand you the documents you asked for. So let's pretend they come into the counter, they walk in what we asked for. Planning tech greets them. They say they're bringing in documents that were requested. You look up the record, you come to the workflow, and you receive the additional info. The only reason that is so important is there's kind of a clock internally in the database that cares about when you ask for information, the clock pauses. It is no longer controlled time on the planning side, right? It could take the customer 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 months to bring in what you asked for. And that time should not be a deficit of the planning work group. We have workload reports that care about that. And so when you say received, the clock pauses. And when you say, or excuse me, needed, the clock pauses. And when you receive the information, the clock starts again. It's a reporting mechanism for how long stuff takes you to process. And we don't want that customer time to be counted against your staff. So that is the importance, in fact, of when you ask for information to make sure that you receive it. Now, when you receive it, I would say, hey, take advantage of the workflow email notification if you are a front counter planning tech type person. And notify the planner that's been assigned that the information came in. You know, intake requirements met, you know, see hard file, or, you know, whatever. And take advantage of the workflow email options down here. There's so many ways you can use these internal notification options, which is the right-hand 2 columns. If Gail is the assigned case planner, then I can let Gail know that the information she asked for came in. Very helpful, right? So instead of having to send a separate email, walk to Gail's desk, make a phone call, whatever, when the information's received as the tech or the front counter person, I can use workflow email to ping Gail and let her know. So I receive the information. Then I make decisions about deeming it complete. Let's say at this point now we've decided that because we got everything we asked for, we can deem it complete. I'm going to save that status result. Coming back to the diagram, I deemed it complete, which means it should advance to staff review. The task is now complete. It's in the completed section. It's green, which means completed. And now the in progress or the next task has been activated, which is staff review. I can minimize the completed section if I don't want to look, if that feels cluttered to you and you like to just see what's active, you can minimize that. I want to know really quick though, under description of work, there's the option to assign the record, to assign the case, record assignment. This is very, very important in planning. So I don't know whomever's going to assign, whether you self-assign or a permit or a planning tech assigns or what have you, or the boss assigns, whatever. It is imperative in planning because of a lot of the reports for planning revolve around this record assignment. So in this case, I might make it planning and assign it to Gail, and I assigned it today. That kind of starts the process. So I suggest that whoever is doing the intake or creating the record, that they come to description of work once they've created the record and they immediately assign it. Now, this record assignment does not automatically assign the workflow tasks. Notice these are still unassigned. And that's because we heard from a lot of agencies that it's just not one for one like that in every case. So assigning the record means Gail is responsible for kind of managing this record at a high level. Maybe she is responsible for processing the entire workflow. However, maybe she'll assign out parts of the workflow. Maybe she'll assign the staff review to a different employee or what have you. So on workflow, then, since we're talking about assignment, now that staff review is an active task, I should assign it, whether it's to Gail or it's to a different party that is a Clatsop County planner. I should assign it to somebody. Just as an example, I'll assign it to Julia, and I will save the assignment. Now, who can do assignment? Anybody. You can self-assign. The planning front counter type people can assign. The manager can assign. It's totally up to you. Same way kind of as the record, assigning the overall case to a planner is important for our workload reports. Assigning the workflow tasks is imperative to allow you to track your assignments. So I'm going to go back to this staff review. I'm going to assign it to me. Of course, it's not going to open. Sometimes if it doesn't expand, just get off the workflow tab, get back on it. It refreshes the tab. I am going to instead assign it to myself. I'm under state e-permitting. I'll assign it to myself wherever I'm at in there. There we are. And I'm doing that just so I can show you kind of how I can now track this assignment. So now my task page in the workflow task, I'm going to go to my assigned tasks. There's that staff review that I was assigned that I am now responsible for. So my task essentially drives your workday. It tells you what reviews have been assigned to you, if you do field inspections, what inspections, and so on. So my task, I would say, is probably the most important page in the system. And I hear that a lot of our users are not using it. They don't really understand how it works. And I would invite you to try to start using it. If you don't use it today and you're an existing Acela user, I would highly suggest you switch over from the dashboard, if you happen to be using the dashboard view, to the task view and take advantage of some of the added functionality.
We have a question.
Ollie, can a task be reassigned in cases where the planner is out sick? Absolutely. So I could go back into this record, oh, Kelly's going to be out sick, or extended leave or something. I could go back into the staff review. It's giving me a heartache about opening tasks for some reason. I could go back into the task directly through the record through workflow, or I could go, excuse me, I could go into it directly through the task list through a given filter, and I could reassign it by opening the record here, and immediately drops me into this record, immediately into workflow on this staff task. Why is that task being such a pill? Doesn't want to ever open. And I can use the assign button, and I could change the assignment from Kelly because she's going to be out unexpectedly on extended leave to Heidi, or change the department to planning and assign it to Jason or whoever. So yes, the assignment can be easily changed. Good question. So now I'm in staff review. Now these are my options. So this will be kind of the end of our training because staff review is kind of where I would say kind of the heart of the planning workflow. So I would just caution you only to consider that you always deem it complete so that you go to staff review so that you have these options available to you. It's kind of where the rubber hits the road is kind of in here. And the reason that is we built out some additional enhancements in the staff review task. So you need to use staff review to take advantage of some of those enhancements. What those are is your agency can actually issue a development permit for various applications that you want to issue a quote unquote permit for. Sign permits, floodplain permits, tree permits, those kind of exceptional services that might be commensurate to an actual permit, so to speak. And you kind of want to, oh, what?
I got another question, sorry.
Don't worry. Yes, there is, Hannah. Unfortunately, we're not seeing it's in the My Task list, but I would come into production. Sorry, let me get back into Clatsop County production. And there are filters for you to manage active tasks for everybody to see what's been assigned. Takes a minute to load, so there's probably a lot of, activity in Clatsop County. This is their production environment. And we can create custom filters for you. Like if you have two planners, we can create a planning tracking Hannah and a planning tracking Jason filter, for instance, if somehow that was helpful to you. But here I just said, show me all the assigned stuff. There are 1,513 tasks here. We can minimize this filter if need be, but remember you can sort. So I can sort, by who things are assigned to. Stacy, Krista, can you, this is just, you know how filters are, right? We need a planning tracking assigned task filter.
Okay,
because this is including everything, unassigned and assigned. And they probably need and want a filter just for the assigned stuff like Hannah mentioned. So I'm going to sort by assigned to staff, Hannah, and it should group everything together. Like here's all the unassigned stuff. I envision there's a lot of pages here, so I'm just going to jump way ahead to page 150, and I'm seeing everything that's assigned to Gail. It's in order, and now I'm seeing stuff assigned to Dean, and so on. So yeah, and Clancy and Cindy and so on. So I can track who's doing what, and we can by the way, we can include a smarter filter for you. Planning, tracking, assigned things so that you don't have to see 1,513 things because a lot of that was unassigned stuff. And we can get down to the task type, planning, tracking, assigned staff reviews. So we can get down to just the individual task type. That might be the most important task of all that you need to filter for. Okay, that's production. I want to jump back here. All right, the last piece here is looking at these. I was telling you that you could issue a permit on some things if you needed to. So pay attention to the different options. I can issue a permit with the final inspection required, or I can issue a permit with no final inspection required. If I issue a permit or decision with no final inspection, the record is going to issue the permit and then close. And the status will be decision permit issued. Done. Because you said there were no inspections required. If I want to do inspections and I need to issue a permit with a final inspection required, the workflow stays at staff review, no change. And then you schedule a field inspection because you said inspections were required. I schedule the inspections through the inspection tab. So I schedule a field inspection. Inspector goes out and does the field inspection. Then they come back in and they result it. Final inspection, well, they result it first in the inspection, of course, the individual inspection, but then you come into workflow and you document that. Final inspection complete approved, final inspection complete denied, and the record closes out in both cases. So if you're going to go out and re-inspect, so if they failed, say you go out and do a field inspection and they failed, don't update workflow until you are at the end of the inspection process. Then document complete or denied. Oops. Because it's going to close out the record. So then the record wouldn't be available for re-inspection if you came in here and resulted the workflow closing out the inspection process. So if you're going to go out and inspect and you deny it, they fail, and then you're going to go out again until they pass, then don't result the workflow for the inspection part until you are all the way done with inspections. Okay, so that's your option for issuing a permit. Otherwise, you would put it in review, or you would ask for revisions because maybe what they submitted as the plans requires a material change in the plan submitted. If it requires a material change in the plan submitted, ask for the revision. That is different than asking for more information. Remember that at any point in the workflow, even if I just said in review, so let's go in here, let's mark it as in review, and I can initiate an email to the customer. I can elect to send an email and put information in here. Your application has been assigned, to Gail, as your case planner. I mean, you can write whatever you want. Note that you can track your application online using the link provided in this email. Again, use email, use workflow email, get creative about it. Take advantage of this functionality of kind of communicating with your applicant or your customer. If you had emails for the licensed professional or the property owner, those would show here too. Or maybe CC somebody internally. Maybe as you get into part of the process or what have you, it's would be helpful to internally notify the planner that you sent this email, or whatever. I would really invite you to get creative using workflow email notification because it's very powerful and you can cut a lot of corners and get all the communication done with your customer. You can point them into documents to look at letters or documents or revised plan, marked up plans, whatever. You can refer them to go pay a fee. If you want them to pay a fee online or not, you can still invite them to pay a fee and tell them that you don't accept online payment and they have to come in the office to pay. But you can still use workflow email notification to get to, to ping them. The only thing is you cannot kick off an email without updating the status. You can't just send an email and not do anything with the status. The status update is what kicks off this email. Okay, so I can submit just saying it's in review, put this information there that's going to email the customer, and I referred that they could track their application using the link provided in the email. And, in short time, I'll get an email here because I was the applicant, and it'll tell me I can track my application using the link. It's now in review. There it is. Important communication regarding your application. Your app's been assigned to Gail's case planner. Note that you can track your application using the link provided in this email. Yay, great communication. Then they're not calling you. Where's my application at in the process? Or, sending all kinds of extraneous communication. You can nip it in the bud by proactively giving them the information. Okay. So really the rest of this is just all in this diagram. I can't really train this per se as much as you just need to learn the diagram. If I'm not issuing a permit, then I would use the tentative approval or denial results to move it into staff report and decision for final approval and denial, or for the potential of a hearing, if a hearing might be required. If I need revisions, if I were to say revisions needed here, it is going to kick off a required email, just like the additional info needed did. And you're going to have to write in the body of the comment what you need them to do and give them instructions about how you want it submitted. If you're going to allow them to submit the revised plan electronically, then point them into using the link provided in the email. If you're not, then tell them to submit hard copies to your office between the hours of 9 and 4, and this is where you're located at. Awaiting review is just like what it says. By the way, agency comments received, the status is missing here. So don't get like off track here. Awaiting review, no change in review. There's just no status for agency comments. It says agency comments received, but we missed it in this diagram here. Shoot, other than that, we talked about all of these pieces. You really just kind of got to get in there, learn that diagram. Once you're ready for decision, tentative approval or denial, I'm going to say tentative approval. Now, if I wanted to email them something, I could elect to email it to the applicant. I can upload something to the documents. Maybe we do a decision document, and I could say, see decision document. In the document, oops, you get the idea here. In the documents attached to your record using the link provided in this email. So, if there's some sort of letter or document, a decision, attach it to documents, and then use workflow email to notify the applicant, the property owner, or whoever else. I can free text in an email, by the way. And I could send them that information and say submit. Now the record is advancing according to the diagram to staff report and decision. Now I'm here. Maybe you don't issue a decision document until you make final decision. Maybe it's here that you'll issue a decision document, attach it to documents, and do a final approval of denial. Elect to email the applicant a record and let them know to go to documents online. All right, I'm right at the nickel here. I've probably lost a few people for lunchtime. I apologize. Are there any burning questions? Activities. Hannah, you are so right. If anybody has 5 more minutes to spare, please stay on. I will do that. Activities. Thank you, Hannah. I'm kind of found myself short on time. There are some activities, administrative activities that are specifically designed for planning. So as an activity, I just add a new activity. I pick the type. So these are for planning, appeal period, hearing, notification, materials routed. So appeal period. So let's say, like I recommended, that I get down here to final approval denial, and now but it's going to close the record, but now the appeal period is going to start. So before I put in the final approval or denial in workflow, I am going to add an activity for the appeal period. I'm going to call it, appeal. You give it whatever activity name you want. I'm going to say that it's in process because we're going to issue final decision today. So the appeal period is going to kick off. I could say appeal 90 days or whatever. I'll just fake it here and say 30 days. The start of the appeal period is today. The end of the appeal period is going to be 30 days in my example. So I'm going to use the calendar widget for the due date on my activity to move ahead 30 days. And then the deadline for the appeal period is 30 days. I need to align the due date of the activity task to the same appeal period deadline or expiration. And I can put in whatever, details here I want or what have you. So now, oops, I forgot to say the priority is just normal, whatever you want to call it. This is internal only. Customer doesn't see activities. Submit that. I have now started a timer. on this record for a 30-day appeal period. And I manage that through my tasks, activities tab. And I look at things that are due today, due in a week, due in 2 weeks, sorry, due in a day, due in a week, whatever. I made that too far out. I made it 30 days. So let me go in here and just make it like tomorrow or something, just so I can show it to you. I'll make it the 5th. You know, this would be the 5th as well. You know, it should always line up. The due date and the appeal period expiration should be the same date. So now when I come into my task and I said, show me things that are due in a week, there it is. And I can manage, and I can also just manage the appeals directly right here, appeals, my department. And I can sort it by due date, soonest to oldest, oldest to newest, you get the idea here, so that I can track the appeal periods accordingly. So my application, let's say we went to final approval or denial in terms of the workflow, and that's okay. It closed the record. We issued a decision document in our staff report and decision. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll just say final approval. And I'm going to say, see, you know, decision document in documents online, blah, 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 right? And I'm also going to say maybe there is a 30-day appeal period, you know, available, you know, whatever kind of information you want to put about, you know, their option to appeal. You probably want to give them a little bit of information here as you're making final decision. I'm going to elect to workflow email them this information. I referred them to documents to see the decision document. Sorry, trying to find my buttons. There. And I've set the activity for the 30-day appeal period, and I submit. The record is going to close because I issued final decision. Closed. It automatically closed it out. I refresh up here, now it says final approval, and I'm still just managing my appeals. They have 30 days. If they come in and they appeal, say a week or two goes by and they decide to appeal, and they come in and they say, they bring their decision document or whatever, or they give you the address or the application number or what have you. You pull up the application. There's the application. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. So you're still within the appeal period. You can check the activity to make sure they're still in the eligible appeal period. And you would create a new record to kick off the appeal. I'd start a new planning tracking application. I'm just going to zip down here to the bottom. I would create it as an appeal. I'd fill out the appeals section, wherever it's at. I think I went too fast right here. And I'd put in the original record number. That's the application that they're appealing. You know, didn't like decision, you know, I don't know, whatever the reason for appeal. And you'd create the appeal record separately, and you would manage the appeal in a separate record, but it would be linked. You would link it through related records. The way to do that is you go to the related record tab, you do a lookup, and you look for the address or the parcel or the record number or whatever it is that, you know, brings the two together. Typically it's the parcel number or the application number. Either way, you can search by the record number for the appeal, or I can search by the parcel number because the appeal should have the same parcel number attached to it. I find a match. I'll search by that parcel number. We didn't actually create the appeal record, but it'll go out and find any other matching records. Let's pretend it's this one is the appeal. And I would select it as a child, linking them together. And I'm not copying anything, just so you know, when you're creating a relationship, this doesn't apply. You just submit right through it. It says a copy's been made. No, It hasn't. All it's done is linked them together. So it'll link the appeal to the original application, but you'll use the appeal record, which I pretended was this one. You'll use the appeal record to track the appeal, to walk it through workflow directly. And you'll manage the appeal period through an activity. The other activities are available to you. I know I'm a few minutes over, I'm so sorry, but the other appeal period or activities that are available for planning. The other big one is notification. This is where you would document all of your notices that are required potentially. So I would say notification, and I would say, you know, notif surrounding prop owners, because I only have 30 characters, so be short and sweet right here. I say that it's completed because I already made notice. I already sent it. I'm just documenting in the activities that I did it. So it's completed. And, you know, and it happened today. So start date, due date today. I did this notification today, you know, sent to, you know, Corvallis Gazette, Times, newspaper. You know, however, wherever you made this notification, however you sent it, yada, yada, you know, put in whatever details here and simply save that. You are recording the administrative requirement that you had to do notice. And it's completed, so it's not going to come up on my task list under task because I already did it. And there's other notifications. So then later on, maybe we have to do a DLCD notification. Or notice, or a newspaper legal notice, or notice of public hearing. You know, you can add multiple, you know, whatever is appropriate. You know, I could say pub hearing, whatever. Also completed. Yeah.
There is another question. They want to know if for notices, can we make them not internal only so folks can see online?
Huh. Never had that question. I can say no. I can say no at the individual level. Now, don't mistake, this is not actually your notice, right? This is just administratively documenting for the permanent record. So a year or two from now, if I need to look back, I can see what notifications were required, made under legal notices, whatever, and I could see when they were made. Now, yeah, you could show that, but you're not, this is not actually meeting your notification requirement. I'm sure you didn't think it was, but I could just say, yes, on the record, I believe, I'd have to really test this. Who asked? So I know, Hannah, okay. So, Hannah, I'd have to just test to see if I made this internal only and I said no, to see if it actually shows online. You could even do your own test, honestly. You could just say no and just go online to this record and see if it shows up. Because I think even if I say no, I'm not 100% sure on ACA that we've configured for activities to be displayed regardless. Even if I said no, internal only no, we might not have configured for activities to be displayed on ACA. So that's just something we'd have to test. That's a good question. And I could say, notice attached in documents. And if it does show online, they could go look at it in documents. So, but I have heard from planners that this does just documenting that you sent it, you know, that you did it, does not suffice for the actual notification. You know, news, legal, notice or whatever, you know, and I submitted that. I said I did it. Oh, and I put in the notification date here. A lot of people ask me, Kelly, what's the difference between the dates here and some of the dates in the details? This is for record keeping purposes. This determines when it shows on your task list and when you determine it to be due. So for an appeal period, if I set the due date for the end of the appeal period, then I've set the date range of the appeal period from the date the appeal period opened to the date the appeal period will be done or concluded. And I can use these due dates and start dates to determine how and when things show up on my task list, how and when they remind me. So even on the appeal, I'll say that. So even on the appeal, if I don't want the appeal to show on my to-do list until it's actually due, I can change the start date to be the same as the due date, which means it won't even show on my task list until the appeal period deadline. Yeah, it's up to you. Some agencies just need to keep track of the deadline date. They don't need to keep track of the whole during the whole appeal period. Some agencies just care about this tickler reminder for when the deadline is. They don't want to track it for 30 or 90 days and have it on their list for the full 30, 60, 90-day period. They only want to see it on their list on the date of the deadline, or a few days before the deadline or whatever. So the start date will determine when it appears on your task list. But I'm telling you, for appeal periods, I would make the start date be the start or the open of the appeal period, and I'd make the due date be the deadline. Okay, there, one last type of thing on here, or there's a couple others, but hearing, if notice I can set the type of hearing and I can set the hearing date. And I'll just say hearing, you know, I don't know, planning commission hearing. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's not started yet because the hearing hasn't happened yet. It's, you know, in the future or whatever. I could put any notes about where it's going to be held at, what time, blah, blah, blah. You know, hearing at 3 p.m., you know, county courthouse. Doggy. And submit. So now I've added a hearing, and I believe that hearing date, I thought the, oh, appeal deadline. I thought we filled in the appeal deadline. I just don't want you to forget that these dates are here. They're manual, they're not automated. Only the completeness determination date automates, and the expiration date should line up with the expiration date that's indicated on the record. We leave this other expiration date in case you want to manually kind of manage your expiration, but this should be populated. I'll figure out why not, but nonetheless, I wanted to let you know on the hearing, if we had gone through hearing, there is a hearing date field there that will pull in activity information. Okay, I've taken you way over. Thank you so much for your questions. And if there's anything else that can help you with, don't hesitate to just reach out to me directly. If it's some sort of configuration changes or updates or fixes or whatever to your existing planning agency, please submit a help desk ticket rather than just emailing me. And that document, learn it. This will be the key to your success in using the planning module. How you can get kind of the most bang for your buck in using the module. Note, we've recorded this session. So as soon as we've processed the recording, it'll be published to our YouTube channel. And I will reply to all of the recipients on this training meeting with a YouTube web address. Thank you, everybody, for attending the full session. And thank you for those who stayed over to learn about activities. I appreciate your time. Thank you.